Jalen Hurts is fresh off of leading the Philadelphia Eagles to a dominant 40-22 win in the Super Bowl, stopping what would have been the first three-peat in the Super Bowl era. He had an incredible showing, throwing for 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick while also leading the team on the ground with 71 yards and a touchdown, earning him the Super Bowl MVP. This has caused the top 5 quarterback discussion to heat up a bit. With Hurts now achieving more in the postseason than Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow and Josh Allen combined with his second Super Bowl appearance, first win, and first Super Bowl MVP. This raises the question of just how good is Jalen Hurts actually? Today, we're going to cover Hurts' entire football life, up to this point, all the way from high school to projecting what the rest of his career may look like, to uncover just how good he actually is. Jalen Alexander Hurts was born on August 7, 1998 in Houston, Texas, to Avarian and Pamela Hurts. Both of his parents taught at Channelview High School, where Avarian coached. With his dad being a football coach, Jalen grew up loving the sport and was a true student of the game. He was not given special treatment by his dad by any means, and Hurts was forced to earn his stripes, not playing on the varsity team until his junior year. However, when he finally got the nod to take over as the team's starting quarterback, he did not look back. In his junior year, he threw for 1,958 yards and 16 touchdowns while also rushing for 750 yards and 17 touchdowns. Most shocking about this is that he achieved all of this in only 8 games, meaning he was averaging about 245 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, along with 94 yards and 2.5 touchdowns on the ground every single game. He kept his foot on the gas in his senior season, while his stats took a bit of a step back. This came as a result of him receiving fewer passing and rushing attempts. Despite this, he still put up a very respectable stat line of 1,536 yards and 18 touchdowns through the air, while contributing another 941 yards and 17 touchdowns on the ground. While Hurts served as the starting quarterback at Channelview High School for only 2 seasons, this was all the time he needed to establish himself as one of the most talented quarterbacks in the entire class of 2016. ESPN rated him as a 4-star prospect while ranking him as the 13th best quarterback and 61st best player in Texas. He received offers from some of the premier programs in college football, including Alabama, Arizona State, Houston, Kansas State, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. However, Hurts was dead set with competing against the best in all of college football and chose to put himself to the test to become the starting quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide, committing to the team on June 5, 2015. With Jay Coker serving as the starting quarterback of the Crimson Tide the previous season and graduating, it left a wide open hole for Hurts to take over the starting spot as a true freshman. And this is exactly what he went on to do. This was a huge feat for Hurts, becoming the first true freshman quarterback to start under Nick Saban. After receiving this high of an honor, all eyes were on Hurts to show up and continue the excellence that was expected in Alabama. Once again, similar to high school, when he was giving his chance to go out and prove himself, he answered the call. As a true freshman playing in a loaded SEC conference, he threw for 2,780 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 9 picks, while also proving to be a force to be reckoned with on the ground, picking up 954 yards and 13 scores. To put the cherry on top, he followed through on keeping the Crimson Tide in the upper echelon of the NCAA. Hurts led the team to an undefeated regular season that earned them a spot in the SEC Championship, where they took on the Florida Gators. Alabama imposed their will in this matchup, winning in dominant fashion by a final score of 54-16. The Crimson Tide entered the playoffs as the clear favorites and earned the top seed. They made quick work of the Washington Huskies in the first round, defeating them 24-7 before taking on the Clemson Tigers. This was a game that came down to the wire, but Alabama did not have enough left in the tank and came just short of a national championship, falling 35-31. It was clear that this game left a sour taste in Hurts and his teammates' mouths, and they were back with a vengeance in the 2017 season. It appeared that they were well on their way to another perfect regular season, but they were stunned in the final week by their rival, the Auburn Tigers. Despite this, they still snuck into the playoffs as the 4th seed. In the first round, they got their chance at revenge against Clemson. This time, they righted their wrongs from the national championship the year prior and took a commanding 24-6 win. In the national championship, they took on the Georgia Bulldogs in an SEC showdown. This was a game that came down to the wire, but when the final whistle sounded, Hurts had led the Crimson Tide to being national champs. This was a great season for him, throwing for 2,081 yards, 17 touchdowns, and just one pick, while also rushing for 855 yards and 8 scores. In the 2018 season, Alabama had a huge target on their backs, but they were not fazed in the slightest. They once again ran the gauntlet and had a perfect regular season. In the SEC championship, they matched up against Georgia. This was not a close game, with the Crimson Tide winning 52-21. They earned another trip to the playoffs, where they comfortably beat the Oklahoma Sooners in the first round 45-34. In their third straight title game, they took on Clemson. Hurts greatly struggled, and at halftime, he was even benched for Tua Tagovailoa. This was a game to forget for both Hurts and Alabama, falling 44-16. It was clear that Tua was the future of Alabama, and Hurts was the odd man out. He made the tough decision to transfer to Oklahoma, where he immediately took over as the team's starter and flourished in the new offensive scheme that produced both Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. He led the NCAA in completion percentage and passing touchdowns with 69.7% and 32 respectively. They dropped an easy game to Kansas State in the regular season, but were still able to make it to the Big 12 championship, where they narrowly defeated the Baylor Bears 30-23. This earned them a spot in the playoffs, where they matched up against a buzzsaw of a team in the LSU Tigers. It was clear that the Sooners were outmatched, and in his final collegiate game, Hurts was embarrassed, with his team losing 63-28. Being benched in Alabama was detrimental to Hurts' draft stock. NFL.com deemed him a player who would develop into a good backup with the potential to develop into a starter. Despite this, he was still ranked as the third best quarterback in the class. In his scouting report, NFL analyst Lance Zierlein said, "Like Tim Tebow, Hurts is a winning, dual-threat quarterback known for his strength, toughness, and character. Hurts is a more accurate passer and better runner than Tebow, but is inconsistent as a decision-maker and tends to break the pocket when throws are there to be made. His deep ball touch and intermediate accuracy improved this year, so teams may see him as the developmental talent who will keep getting better in the right scheme." Hurts wound up faring a bit worse on draft day than many scouts expected. He had to wait until day 2 for his name to be called, and he was the 5th quarterback off the board, with Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love all being selected in front of him. But with the 53rd overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles selected Hurts. With the Eagles still having Carson Wentz as their starting quarterback, many were confused why they would use a second-round pick on another player at the position. But it was clear that Philadelphia was in it for the long haul and were going to give him some time to develop. Despite Wentz leading the team to a 3-8-1 record as a starter, Hurts was only given the chance to start in 4 games. It was clear that he still had some steps to take before he was a starting caliber player, throwing for 1,061 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 picks, while completing only 52% of his passes. To make things even worse, the Eagles struggled to a 1-3 record with Hurts at the helm. In the 2021 season, it was clear that the coaching staff had full faith in Hurts as the future of the franchise. He had one of the best games of his entire career in Week 4 when they took on the Kansas City Chiefs. Hurts held his own against Patrick Mahomes, throwing for 387 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 picks, setting a career high for passing yards. Despite his efforts, they still fell by a final score of 42-30. Games like this proved that he had the potential to truly be a special talent at the quarterback position. But this was a season of highs and lows both for Hurts and the Eagles. He threw for 3,144 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 picks while leading the team to an 8-7 record in his 15 starts. This earned them a spot in the playoffs, where they took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round. In his playoff debut, Hurts threw for 258 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. This was a less than ideal first taste of the postseason, with the Eagles falling 31-15. The following year, Hurts turned the corner and made another huge jump, appearing to be one of the most talented quarterbacks that the league had to offer. He had another game to remember, this time coming in Week 8, when the Eagles took on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hurts was getting anything he wanted through the air, throwing for 285 yards and 4 touchdowns, tying a career high for single-game passing touchdowns. This was a huge win for Philly, taking the game by a final score of 35-13. Hurts put together an incredible season through the air, clearly benefiting from the team's acquisition of A.J. Brown during the offseason. He finished the year throwing for 3,701 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 6 picks, leading the Eagles to a 14-1 record in the 15 games he started in. This earned him a spot in the Pro Bowl and on the All-Pro second team, with Hurts finishing in second place in the MVP voting. They started their playoff run with a dominant win over the New York Giants in the divisional round, taking the game 38-7. Hurts had a very efficient game through the air, throwing for 154 yards and a pair of touchdowns. In the NFC Championship, they took on the San Francisco 49ers. Hurts did not have to do much in this contest, just throwing for 121 yards and rushing for 39 yards, and a touchdown in the easy 31-7 win. This punched their tickets to the Super Bowl, where they faced off against the Kansas City Chiefs. Hurts gave it his all in this matchup, throwing for 304 yards and a touchdown. But it was not enough to come out with a win, and in the final seconds of regulations, the Chiefs were able to hit a game-winning field goal to come out on top 38-35. The 2023 season was arguably Hurts' best as a passer. He had an elite showing in Week 8 against the Washington Commanders, in which he threw for 319 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 picks, tying his career high for single-game touchdowns. Even with this elite performance, the game still went down to the wire, with Philadelphia escaping with a narrow 38-31 win. He finished the year with 3,858 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 15 picks. Along with this, he also found the end zone 15 times on the ground, playing a big role in him earning a return to the Pro Bowl. The Eagles were one of the favorites in the NFC to make a return to the Super Bowl, but they were stunned in the wildcard round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hurts had a solid day through the air, throwing for 250 yards, and a touchdown by Philadelphia was throttled by a final score of 32-9. The offseason acquisition of Saquon Barkley was a game-changing move for the Eagles and completely opened up their offense. While DeAndre Swift was a very serviceable back during his time with the team, picking up a player like Saquon made Philadelphia the most dangerous offense in the league. As a result of the team being more eager to run the ball, Hurts' passing numbers took a bit of a hit, throwing for just 2,903 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 picks. While finding the end zone an additional 14 times on the ground, they started off their playoff run with a convincing 22-10 win over the Green Bay Packers. Hurts was very efficient in this matchup, throwing for just 131 yards but finding the end zone twice. In the divisional round, they took on the Los Angeles Rams. He made the most of his opportunities in this game, completing 75% of his passes for 128 yards. But Hurts also had a strong game on the ground, picking up 70 yards and finding the end zone once in the narrow 28-22 win. This matched them up with a divisional rival in the NFC Championship, the Washington Commanders. This game was over almost as soon as it started. Hurts was everywhere in this matchup, throwing for 246 yards and a touchdown while also rushing for 3 scores on just 10 attempts in the dominant 55-23 win. It appeared as if the Eagles were hitting their stride at the perfect time, and they kept their foot on the gas against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. This was a career-defining game for Hurts, leading the team both through the air and on the ground with 221 yards and a passing touchdown while rushing for 72 yards and another score. His efforts were more than enough for the Eagles to win it all, taking the game by a final score of 40-22 and also earned him Super Bowl MVP honors. So what's next for Hurts? With the core that the Eagles have built and the masterful moves that they make seemingly every season, they could be a very dangerous team for years to come with Hurts at the helm. There is no reason why they should not be Super Bowl contenders for years to come. It is clear that he has no intentions to leave the team, and he's more than willing to sacrifice individual stats for the good of the team. While he likely will not be contending for MVP awards in the near future, especially while Barkley is on the roster, he is the captain of the most dangerous offense that the league has to offer. When the Eagles are playing at their best, there's absolutely no one who has a chance of beating them. Even though Hurts has not had many performances that have really popped out of the stat sheet recently, he plays an extremely efficient brand of winning football. So how good is Jalen Hurts actually? In terms of pure talent, it's clear that Hurts is not the best quarterback in the league by any means. However, after the clinic that he put on during the 2024 season, most notably in the Super Bowl, it's hard to argue that he is not a top 5 player at the position. There are very few players in the league that are able to get it done both through the air and on the ground, as well as Hurts. And if he's able to continue to add Super Bowl appearances and wins to his resume, there's a strong chance that he goes on to be remembered as one of the best quarterbacks from this generation. Let us know what you think. Is Jalen Hurts top 5? And if so, where does he rank for you? Be sure to like and subscribe and tune in for our next video.